So my name's Cheryl Kuczynski. I was born in August 1953. As a child, I can't really remember a time when I didn't go to Brady, but it must have been when I started school. And I went to school just up the road from Brady, Robert Montefiore Primary School. I started school early, so I think I must have been about 4 years old. It was just, you know, the way things were. I went straight from school when school finished, across the road to Brady. Had my drink, food, had my club money in my hand. I was given it. Some of the time I went with my sister because she went to the same school and she went to Brady as well. My family consisted of my mum and dad, and I have 2 siblings, both older than me. I have a brother who's 6 years older than me, and my sister is 4 years older than me. And we lived in a flat above Spitalfields Market, a fabulous flat that today would probably set somebody back £2 million because it's in Spitalfields. But even then, it was a nice flat, high ceilings, big windows, looked out over Commercial Street, over Spitalfields Market. Across the road was the 10 Bells pub, which we weren't allowed to, well, we weren't allowed in, we were kids, but even as teenagers, you know, we wouldn't have gone in there because it was very much a market traders pub, and therefore it was for lorry drivers and market traders, and quite a lot of prostitution, you know, took place out of the pub. It was a very rough pub. And funnily enough, a few years ago, I went in there, went to Spitalfields, and went into the pub, which is now very, you know, it's a very smart pub, gastro pub, but it still felt very strange going in there. You know, I'm in the 10 Bells. It was also across the road to Christchurch, and Christchurch, it was derelict. It was a derelict building. Nobody held church services there. And there was, in the church gardens, that was called Itchy Park. And when you think middle of Spitalfields, I couldn't call it a green space, but it was a scrubby space. I never went in there. We weren't allowed in as kids, but I think my brother and sister snuck in. And when my mother heard that they'd gone to Itchy Park, that's it. They were in the bath being scrubbed from top to tail, which I understand because it was used by meth drinkers. Although it was derelict, there was a crypt in Christchurch that was a shelter for homeless people, meth drinkers, etc. So in terms of the area, it was really not as it is now. It was quite dirty. The market, obviously, when the market finished trading at whatever time, midday, 1 o'clock, you know, there was rotten fruit and veg everywhere until the streets were cleaned. So it wasn't a very salubrious area, but I have to say I loved it. I loved it. There was always something going on. There wasn't much on television, but you could always just, you know, look out of the window and there was always something going on, either in the pub or by the church or just, you know, on the pavements. Always people having rows and arguments and fights, and yeah, it was great fun. I loved it. My mother worked downstairs bookkeeping for one of the fruit wholesalers. It was a kind of family business. It was owned by her cousins. She wanted to do, you know, as much as she could for the business. So she worked there. They were both Polish, but my father came over to England during the war, met my mother, married. After the war, he was naturalised as British because he fought in the Polish army and then the British army. But on our birth certificates, he has different trades. You know, it says what your father's profession is. And I think on my brother's birth certificate, he was still in the army. On my sister's birth certificate, he had a dry cleaning business. And on my birth certificate, he was a grocer. And that's what he carried on doing until he retired. And that was his shop was in Quaker Street. That was about a 5-minute walk from where we lived. So both our parents were nearby. my mother's and father's story very different. So my mother came over in the 1910s, and she came over with some of her cousins, who she was about 6 or 7 years old. They had all got papers to come over to the UK because my grandfather was living in the UK. He had come over earlier. My grandmother was still in Poland. And it was a cousin of my mother that was supposed to come over, but she caught scarlet fever and died, and she couldn't come. So rather than waste the papers, my mother assumed her identity and came over to England with her cousins, and actually never saw her mother again because her mother died a few years later. So that was very sad. She always got very emotional when she talked about her mother. So my mother was educated in the UK at the same school that my sister and I went to, in fact. So she sounded, to all intents and purposes, she had a very nice speaking voice, given that she was from the East End and had lived in Spitalfields all her life, most of her life. She had a very nice speaking voice, but she was actually originally Polish. My father came over from Poland during the war. When he was in Poland, he was what they call a Bundist. The Bund was a socialist Jewish organisation, and my father was a Bundist from a very young age. But he had come from a very Hasidic family, and just one boy and about six sisters. So he was very spoilt, wasn't interested in religion. He was much more interested in, the fight of the worker, and so became a Bundist. And to cut a very, very long story short, that goes via Siberia and Russia, and finally joining the Anders army in Poland. He then managed to get papers that said he was a Christian, because the Polish army unofficially didn't accept Jews into the Polish army. But he had met somebody in the gulags in Siberia. He'd been sent by the Russians. He had been sent to Siberia as a political prisoner. And he had met somebody in the gulag, and this guy was a Polish captain in the army. And he said, if you get to, I'm now going to rejoin my unit. If you get to a certain place and you have papers, you have to have papers that don't say you're Jewish, then I'll be able to get you into the Polish army, and then you'll have clothes to wear, food to eat, and shoes on your feet, because he had nothing. He was on the train going to this place. There was lots of rioting in the streets, people dying of starvation. He managed to get papers from a dead person, and those papers belonged to Kuczynski. The guy was called Kuczynski, and so my father took these papers, and the captain was true to his word and got him into the Polish army. Then his unit was transferred to Scotland. They were shipped over to Scotland, and my father decided that there were probably more anti-Semites in this unit in the Polish army than there possibly were in Germany, and it got so bad that one of his fellow soldiers said, "When we get to the front line, the first bullet is for you." And my father thought that, I don't want to fight for the Poles. I want to fight against the Germans, but I don't want to fight with the Poles. And he organised a mass desertion of, when he was in Scotland, of the Jewish soldiers, because obviously there were other Jewish soldiers. They had managed through fair means or foul to join the Polish army as well. And it got into the newspapers, and that's where he met my mother, because my mother was in London, he was in Scotland, but because my mother spoke Yiddish and English, she was doing quite a lot for Jewish soldiers. If you deserted during the war, deserters were shot. But it happened at the time when stories were coming out about the concentration camps and how Jews were being treated, etc. So there was a groundswell of opinion that, you know, these people shouldn't be shot, that, you know, they should be listened to, and that, you know, people should listen to what they were asking for. And they were basically asking to join the British Army because they wanted to fight the Germans with the British. Long story short, that's exactly what happened. With my mother's help, translating, etc., etc., they were allowed to join a unit in the British Army. So, and then they started seeing each other, and the rest is us, history. I joined Brady, really, there was no choice about it, there was no question about it. My brother had gone as a child to Brady, my sister had gone to Brady, I was going to go to Brady. My mother and father both worked very long hours, so for them it was a godsend, in terms of, you know, we went to school in the morning. From school we went to Brady. They knew we were being looked after. They knew we were in a good, positive atmosphere. That the club leaders were very dedicated. We were learning things, we were doing things, enjoying ourselves far more than if we'd been at home, because TV, I think, in those days didn't start until, I don't know, 6 o'clock. So there's no TV to watch. And yeah, there was never really a time that I can remember that I didn't go to club. Once a week you had just subs. I can't remember how much they were, but yeah, there was somebody on the front desk taking your subs, and just everyone was so lovely. You know, you wouldn't, you know, I couldn't wait to get to club. It was for, you know, Jewish kids that very often came from very, very poor families, living in poverty, living in not, you know, overcrowding, maybe badly heated, badly ventilated homes. Somewhere after school that they could come and learn things, enjoy things, play, have a good time, and, you know, exactly what I said, get a hot meal, have food to eat, and friends to play with. And I say for Jewish kids, it was mainly for Jewish kids, but I don't think they ever turned away any non-Jewish kids that wanted to join. In the area, it was predominantly Jewish, so the kids were predominantly Jewish. And I think there was a great ethos. I think the boys' club came first. I think there was a great belief that, you know, keep boys out of trouble, channel their energies, get them doing football, boxing, table tennis. It's quite interesting because I played table tennis at Brady when I was a kid, and now that I've got more time because I'm not working, I've joined a table tennis club, and it just came back to me. You know, I went in and I said I'm a real beginner, but, you know, suddenly I was serving, and they were, wow, you know, where's this come from? And it just came back. My club leader, when I first went, so when I was 4, was a woman called Mrs. Green, and she seemed ancient then. I mean, I would have described her then as a really old lady. She was probably, I don't know, 40 or 50, I don't know. Very short, she was probably about 4'11", grey hair, very short grey hair. She always wore what I used to call a fartuch. It's a Yiddish word, but it was like an overall, a button-through kind of overall to keep your clothes clean, that kind of thing. And I can't say that she was maternal. She wasn't the kind of, I mean, you know, we're all little ones. She wasn't the kind of woman that would, you know, put her arm around your shoulder or whatever. But she managed to, you know, keep us all in order. And the first thing that we would have would be, there would be all different tables set up with art stuff or bits of clay, plasticine, I guess whatever, you know, whatever people had donated, I don't know. But and so we would make things to take home to our parents, kind of things you do in nursery school, I suppose. But the highlight was, I think we used to leave at about 6, so I guess we got there about 3:30 after school. And I think we left about 6 o'clock. I mean, I never looked at the time really, but probably about 6. And the highlight was she would tell Bible stories. So at the end, she would get us all sitting round in a circle, and she held our attention. She never used a book. She didn't read from a book. She would just tell stories. Mostly they were Bible stories. I think she also told a few, kind of Brothers Grimm type stories. They were mainly Bible stories. And then we'd go home. A lot of the mothers then, would collect the kids. In my case, I used to go home with my sister, because I think at that time my sister was probably in the juniors. I was in the play centre. I think she was I think juniors was the next one up. She was in the juniors, and we would walk home together, which is amazing, because if I was 4, my sister was 8, but it was quite a rare occurrence that somebody would come and collect us. And it was about a 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk home. A couple of times I remember we got not set on, I won't say set on, not physically anyway, but jeered at, shouted at by some of the kids from the estates round and about. But that was quite rare, but it was quite frightening when it happened. Phyllis, she was my youth leader when I then went up from the play centre into the juniors, when I guess I was about 8. She was lovely in a kind of, when I was that age, in a slightly distant way, because she was in charge of all the juniors. So that was everything from from drama, gym, netball, table tennis, all the different activities for girls, because the girls and the boys were separated at that age. I was in awe of Phyllis, because she had an aura around her. To me, she was tall. I mean, I was 8 years old. I was short. She probably wasn't that tall, but to me, she was very, very tall. She always stood very straight, because I think she was a dancer, or had a dancer's background. So she always stood very straight. Sometimes looked quite serious, but then would straight away break into a smile or laughter. And I had more dealings with her as well when I started to do shows. I was kind of quite keen on doing the shows at Brady, and they're always great fun, very well put together. She was always very involved. She would come to rehearsals. She would take rehearsals when she had time, and very involved backstage, and I'm sure front of house. I suppose my memory of Phyllis is more clear when I was, I think I must have been doing maybe A-levels, or maybe even at the beginning of university. I bumped into her one day in the street, and we got chatting, and within 5 minutes I had agreed, she had persuaded me that what I really wanted to do was become a part-time youth leader. And when she used to take groups away to Skeet, I used to go and help out, looking after the kids, being in charge of games or drama, or whatever we needed to do, keeping them in line. Yes, I was one of the youth leaders, but she was fantastic. She was. It was like family, but Brian was always very involved as well. Her husband, in ferrying, carrying, being sent to do this, that, and the other. So he was always really involved, and her brother a bit, maybe less so. Because of where I lived in Spitalfields, there weren't many kids, my friends, that lived near to me. So if I hadn't have had club, I would have just gone home after school and not played with anybody, not done anything. There was no TV that early in the afternoon, so I think I would have been very bored. Certainly, I think I'm more socialised because of club. I'm used to talking to lots of people. I'm used to meeting new people all the time, and I think subliminally, I think it's helped me in my career in terms of being comfortable with new people, not being fazed by new events or different situations that arise, because when you're with a big group of people and you're doing something like, you know, being in a youth club, things happen, things change, people come, people go. I was quite a shy child, or I was a very shy child, and I think the club helped me through that. And I feel very sad because there aren't so many youth clubs around. And I feel very sad that young people in their early teens, you know, let's say from about 10 upwards, don't have somewhere to go where they can meet other people that's not school, where they can do shows, hang around with their friends, you know, chew the fat, have a coffee with somebody or a cup of tea with somebody, learn to box, do football, whatever they want to do. I think it's a great shame, and I think it's very short-sighted that the government doesn't put more money into that kind of thing, because I think it really helps young people grow and develop and be able to mix with a wide variety of different people. There was a lot of loyalty to the club. So, you know, you were a Bradian, and you were proud to go to Brady. As I say, I went to Oxford and St George's and have never lived it down, really. You know, I still feel bad about it. Also having a focal point in one place for young people to do all those kind of things. Yes, there might be boxing clubs, or there might be table tennis clubs, or there might be football coaching, drama clubs. You know, my niece goes to a drama group. But what Brady did was bring it all together under one roof, that you met people that predominantly were there to do the drama, but suddenly they were chatting and having a cup of tea or a drink with the guys that came to do football. And I just think there was a melding of you know, beliefs, attitudes that, you know, helps you mature. Certainly helped me mature, I think.